Welcome, everyone. My name is Greg Magic Bernstein, and I'm co-hosting this call with Amara Charles. And just to tell you just a bit about myself and what we're going to do on the call, and then Amara is going to do the same. I've been leading retreats in Hawaii, in mystical places, in vortexes for just a hair under 20 years now, and studying with Kahuna since 1996 and other shaman in navigating these realms and how to open up the energies of these places so that we can have transformational and awakening experiences there. And these journeys are potent and powerful. So I've got a long history of that, as well as sort of Western techniques and how to effectuate change and transformation in people, such as hypnosis and all sorts of different modalities. But at this stage of the game, my primary modality is transmission, shamanic transmission, and also creating the space for people to actually be able to enter into mystical realms, shamanic realms that they may not otherwise be able to, where anything is possible. And that's really what the mystical realms are about, and why we want to enter them. And what's there is that these are places where the veil between different universes, between different worlds, between different realities, between the one where you're who you are now and the one where you're actually fully actualized as who you came here to be on the planet and what you came here to do, are available in these realms. They're the psychic realms. They're the places where instant healing can happen, instant manifestation. There's an ancient Hawaiian principle, one of the 7 principles of Huna, that says there are no limits. And that's what these realms are. They're the place where there are no limitations. And so we want to, on the call tonight, introduce you to these realms and tell you a little bit about what can happen there, what kind of results one can get from being in these places, both in your everyday ordinary reality and in going to a vortex site like on Maui or somewhere else, as well as share with you a little bit about how you can actually get there on your own, with just a little bit of some tips and sharing about that. So that's a little bit about what we're going to do in myself. And now Amara's going to share a little bit.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amara Charles, and I have been a guide to thousands of people over the last 30 years, helping them with their intimate relationships. And one of the things that people might not know about me is where I believe that I get the real source of my knowledge, my understanding of people, and my wisdom is from the hundreds and hundreds of shamanic ceremonies that I have done over the years, where I have cultivated a connection with creation, with spirit, and where I have discovered ways and found in myself how I could connect with creation, how I could have a conversation with the waters, the wind, the earth, the fire, to produce tremendous healings for myself and for many other people. So I have the great blessing of having traveled all around the world. And for me, one of the fascinating things about entering into the mystical realms and navigating in these realms is the recognition and the realization that while we all desire to have these mystical experiences, and we desire to have these epiphanies and tremendous things happen, for me the truth is that the mystical realm is always present within us. That really the secret to entering the mystical realms and navigating the mystical realms is about learning to listen to your heart. And this is the real dialogue. And you see, because we all have a physical body and an energy body and a spirit body. And when something goes wrong and we want to go to mystical realm to have physical healing, You know, there are times where we think, well, I'm going to, you know, cut off my nose and cut off my ear, or cut my stomach, or cut something out. And you know, we know this, the tangle, the confusion, it's in the mind, in the realm of the mind. And so the confusion comes back, the harm, the hurt in the body comes back. You see, because the body and the energy body and the spirit body, they are not really separate bodies at all. And whenever we simply learn how and go into a place where we very, very clearly listen to our heart. You see, the spirit realms, you know, there are many realms, many things within the mystical realms that are invisible. But you see, like music is invisible. We can't see music, but music, it touches our heart, and therefore it can move us and it can heal us. The key is to learn how to concentrate and bring together the separate forces. You see, in our daily lives, our body is in one place, our mind is in another place, our spirit is in another place, and we want to fix them. But the real secret to navigating in the mystical realms is to bring them together and to harness the light within us. And when we go into an inspiring place, like what we're going to talk about tonight, that finding our heart, listening to our heart, we turn off everything else. And sometimes going to a far away land, into a magical place, this helps us greatly to be able to, you know, really let go of all of the distractions in the 3D world that we just get pulled away and separate our energy. And what happens when we harness, when we focus our love, when we focus and we can really listen to our heart, what happens is we begin to hear nature. And nature tells us exactly what we need. The answers are within ourselves, and the ability to listen, to feel, to know, to hear. That is really what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, Amara, because one of the things that I find to be the key to entering into the shamanic realms or the mystical realms is presence, which is part of what Amara is speaking to, is to really be fully embodied. And when we are fully embodied, then we are in the mystical realms. You know, I often tell people that the most sacred site on earth that you can ever go to is exactly where you are, if you're fully present and aligned with spirit and following that. And that's another thing that's important about navigating these realms and really being able to maximize your experience there, is to be tuned in with your inner guidance. And it's something that's always present on my retreats. It's a experiential teaching where I offer the teaching of how to tune in deeply with your inner guidance, with your connection with spirit, how to know spirit and how it speaks to you, how it shows you pictures or feelings uniquely different than any other experience you have. Every person on this call and every person in the world has a way that spirit communicates with you that is unique to you, that if you recognize it and study it, you can have the power of knowing what is spirit is guiding you to in any moment in your life. There's a sacred site on Maui. It's called El Valley. And it actually resonates the frequency of connection with our higher selves, of connection with spirit, of living a life that is greater than our egoic personality's decisions about what it wants and what it doesn't want. And I had a gentleman that I had taken on retreat into this El Valley, and he was going through something where he was in his, I'd say, late middle-aged area of life. He'd been a salesperson his whole life in a certain career, but he kept having this feeling that there was something else that he needed to do, that there was some dharma that he wasn't fulfilling, some life purpose that he just couldn't quite tap into. And he'd been a healer when he was very, very young, but had given that up and had been a salesman his whole life. And so while we were in El Valley that day, everywhere we went that day, he kept getting these messages that he needed to become a healer again. But he'd been so disconnected from his guidance for so long, disconnected from spirit, living in the fast-paced world of responsibility and all the things that we have to do in the world, that he couldn't quite trust it yet. And so what's beautiful is this site just amplifies, accelerates, and catalyzes our connection with spirit so that it's going to be louder and bigger, and anything in the way of it is going to move and shift. And so during that day, some of the things that were in the way of his guidance released and emptied out, because the site is actually also a death site. So it also resonates the frequency of releasing the old and letting go of old patterns and old beliefs and old fears and old ways of being. And it can happen in this site in an instant. Something you've tried to change your entire life, gone through many modalities, psychological, spiritual, or otherwise, can actually release in a moment in these mystical places where all possibilities are coexisting at the same time, and the veil is thinner. And so we reached the end of the day, and he still was unsure. It was still kind of doubt in there about whether this was real or not, that he kept getting these messages. And so we're actually walking out of the place, and we're right at the place where you go right, and it takes us to the parking lot, and it's obvious that that's where the parking lot is. And just before he stepped onto the path, I said, now keep checking in with your guidance, because he'd been practicing all day following his guidance. And he stopped, and he looked at me with this puzzled look on his face, and he said, I'm supposed to go left, but the car's to the right. And I said, well, then let's go left. And so we went left, and we walked up this little hill, and there was this older, elder-looking Hawaiian man standing there with a goat. And both of us were mesmerized, both by the goat and the Hawaiian man. And we walked over and asked if we could pet the goat, and we started petting this goat. And the Hawaiian man started to just download all kinds of information to my client, just streaming information. And it was really all directly related to everything that we talked about that day. And it was an affirmation of everything that we had talked about that day. And then at the very end, he said, after about 15 minutes, oh, by the way, my name is Cello. And my client stuck his hand out and said, my name is, and he said his name, and they shook hands, and this Hawaiian man closed his eyes and started shaking. And he's holding my client, and he says, let's see, what shall I say his name was? Let's say his name was Peter, because I'm not going to use his real name. He says, Peter, you are a healer, Peter. It's time for you to make change. I've been dreaming about you. I've been telling my congregation back at the church that I speak to 3 weeks now. I've been telling them that Peter, you got to come here. I'm going to see you at EL Valley. And I have to tell you, you're a healer. It's time. Now is the time. And we hadn't said a word to this man. We'd only been listening to him. So there's a magical synchronicity that happens in the shamanic realms. Shamanism is a 35,000-year-old word. And it simply means somebody that's actually able to experience more of reality, more than our five senses. And it's not necessarily tied in with Native Americans or any other particular culture. There's a lot of connotations of it, but it's really somebody that can just heal without using healing implements, that can see into realms that we don't normally see in, communicate with others without our normal communication means. And following guidance took us right into this magical synchronicity where this man was able to deliver to my client the message that he needed, that solidified within him the reality of what had been occurring, so that he could then actually make this change and really bring his dharma onto the planet and be who he really is. So guidance is very powerful. There was another man that came and followed his guidance. He wanted to know, should I marry this woman? And he brought her on retreat, and he said, Magic, I don't know if I should marry her. I'm like 90% sure, but I want spirit to tell me. And I said, then just follow your guidance throughout the retreat. And that's literally an invitation that everybody gets to do and find out all through the retreat. It's experiential. Everything people are doing is following guidance. They come ask me questions, and I often say back, what does your guidance say? So he's in the forest, and he gets guided to go off the trail and into the forest, like bushwhacking, pulling himself through trees and over bushes and around rocks. And he gets deep into the forest, and there's a rock that he's called to sit with his back to, and he sits down, and he's just sitting there for a moment, and he sees something out of the corner of his eye. And in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the jungle, not around any paths or any other people, where probably no one has been in hundreds of years, he sees hanging in the bushes fishing wire. And on the end of the fishing wire are two wedding rings that are entwined in each other, a feminine looking one and a masculine one. And he knew he had his answer. He knew that he was going to ask this woman to marry him. And he did ask her to marry him. And they came back on another retreat and they got married. So these are the keys to the realms. Now, these aren't just obviously the key to the mystical realms when we're in a sacred site. This is the key to your life. This is the key to, if you want to manifest anything in your life or actualize your full potential, then actually being in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing is where and how those synchronicities are going to occur.
Mm. Mm. Oh, that's beautiful. You're a fabulous storyteller. I just love listening to your stories. And I also pay attention and, to what comes in. And there was an email that came in last night when we sent out the notice for this retreat, for this talk here. And so, yes, we are doing a retreat on Maui, July 7th through the 14th. And this woman wrote in, and she says, it may be difficult to attend this event as it takes place at 2 a.m. my time here in the UK, but the email came into my inbox within minutes of my forming a very clear intention to heal an old core belief that affects my relationships with men, especially intimate relationships. It is the belief that I am not really wanted. A belief I formed in relation to my father, who I felt I didn't really want a daughter, and certainly not as a firstborn, but the belief, maybe from past lives too. I have set an intention to heal and clear this negative belief, to replace it with, I am really wanted. And with this in place, to attract my soulmate, life partner, into physical reality and relationship. And she asked me to bring this into this call, so I decided I would honor that. So that's for you, Anne. And this reminded me of a story of a time when I was in the south of France. And, that her note really touched me because I think all of us at one point or another have felt in our life that somehow I'm not really wanted. So whether it's by our parents, original parents, or by somebody, I'm not really wanted. And this triggered a memory for me when I was in the south of France, and I was standing out on a balcony. I was there visiting with a group of people, and at this moment I was just in one of the open fields. There was stone walls all around, and I just looked up into the sky, and there was this like spattering, like all the stars. I had never seen such brightness, so many stars all over the sky. And then I was standing in front of this big like a big stone. It was the vertical stone. It was just right in front of me. And I looked up at the stars, and then I looked into this stone, and the light of the stars, it just started moving into this stone. And I don't remember if I was there for 5 minutes or hours. And what began to happen, there was this beautiful shape of this beautiful woman, this beautiful goddess in the rock. It began to appear with these shining lights. And I remember I just went completely silent, and I just started crying. And I put my arms around this stone. And at the time I was asking and I was questioning for myself. I'd been through just a string of relationships, and for one reason or another, none of them lasted, none of them worked out. I felt very, very lonely, and I just felt like, well, it's just never going to work out for me. And so I just remember feeling completely held as I was holding this stone. And then I looked down on my body, and all the stars were like flowing, all these lights were like flowing in my body. And then I heard this voice. And she said, my dear, you are never alone. You are always held by creation. I am always with you, and I'm always going to be with you. You never have to worry about being wanted, because creation wants you. You are wanted. And so I remember finally walking away from this experience, and something lasted. It is still there in me as I tell the story today. And I was very, very lucky because I was staying in the south of France in this little village, and I was painting in this village every day. And I would go out from the group I was staying in, and I would go out and paint during the day. We could just walk as far as we wanted and paint all day in the light of southern France. I mean, it was remarkable. And one day, this was the next day after this experience with this mystical, magical being that lit up inside of me, literally. I was walking in the peach orchard, and there was this gorgeous gentleman, and his name was Francois, and it was so long ago I don't mind telling his name. And everybody thought that I was out and about painting all day. And I did, I was painting, but I was also having this marvelous rendezvous with Francois. And he spoke only French. And I learned to speak French rather fluently, at least as much as you need in that occasion. And I spent the entire 2 months every day, visiting and seeing him. And, he did, of course, fall in love with me, and he wanted to marry me. And I was like, no, exactly. You have, no, I'm going to go back to, America and begin my life there. But I really feel that was a direct blessing. And since that time, I can always access that knowing that I am loved, that I am held, that I am wanted within all of creation. And you see, those times when we have some great inner pain that sometimes we can't even articulate, or we have some really big troubles that keep arising, that keep showing up in our lives. They show up with other people, circumstances. People betray us, they disappoint us, they cheat, and so on and so forth. Or we have sickness, we have disease, or we have things that we truly desire to heal. And as I said earlier, we can go out and we can try to fix these things on the outside. And surgery can help very, very much temporarily. But if we do the surgery and then we still have the tangle in our mind, we have the tangle in our spirit, that's going to come back somehow. It's going to come around the corner, and it's going to find its way in to take away our life force energy. And so when we go into the mystical realms, you see, the things that happen physically are only on the outside. They show up after a period of the weaknesses and the imbalances, they come closer and closer to us until they affect our physical body. But you see, our spirit is much faster than our physical body. And our spirits can travel into the mystical realms. And when we learn to listen to our heart, when we learn to listen very quietly, then we can hear the inner guidance, the inner wisdom. Sometimes it's a past thing that has happened. Sometimes it's our inner little girl that is very lonely or very hurt. Sometimes it's our little boy that has such old wounds from such a long time ago. You think, my goodness, I should have grown up from that already. But sometimes these old wounds and these old afflictions, when we go into and allow ourselves and give ourselves the respite and the time and the permission to let everything else go. I love what Magic said, is that we go to places and we tune ourselves in so that things that we have been carrying on, they can lift, they can disperse. We can find the answers, we can, find forgiveness, we can speak to spirit and take care of business that is ours to take care of, so that we can find the balance again. You see, in a human state, we are meant to be in balance. And when we have our energy body and our mind body and our spirit together, all together very strong as one, we never need to get sick. We never need to feel imbalance. And so that's what going into these places and learning very, very effective, yet very, very simple practices to turn off the distractions that take away our ability to harness our life force energy and listen to our inner wisdom. So for me, the mystical realm is within us always, and it's actually happening, right here, even on the internet. It can happen because there is actually a transference of energy that does occur wherever we travel.
That's beautiful, Amara. Yeah, when we're present in our hearts and our bodies, then healing naturally occurs. Connection to the psychic realms naturally occurs. Our authentic self naturally comes out. I was walking through the forest once at a sacred place on Maui, and I'd actually been sick for maybe months, actually, with digestive problems that just weren't healing. And being in that forest, that particular forest has the energy of presence. It has the energy of being in our hearts and in our bodies. It has the energy of being home. Most of us are living our lives like we're driving a car and we're sitting up on top of the car, steering through the sunroof with our hands and some poles on the pedals, and wondering why the car keeps hitting things and running into things and getting into accidents, because we're actually not in the car driving it. Most of us are walking around in some kind of dissociative state, which I call thinking. When we're thinking, we're not home. We're not in the body, in our sensing vehicle, our vehicle for this human experience, for our spirit to have this experience. And the forest that day, it just dropped me straight into my body. And I suddenly felt like I weighed 400 pounds. Not like I had gained weight, like I was carrying extra weight, but just the body that I am was suddenly like made of lead. And I was moving so incredibly slowly because it took me into what was really present. What was really happening in here? There was a dis-ease in my body that I was disassociated with because I didn't like it.
Oh.
And that, as I resisted it, it prevents the healing from occurring. And the forest that day brought me right into full oneness with me, with what was present in my body, in my soul, in my spirit. And being totally at home in my body not in my mind, the pain was no longer pain, because it's the mind that makes up the interpretation that the sensations in my body are pain or pleasure or whatever else it makes up. If you take out the commentator, they're just sensations. I just am. And when that happened, I was woken up to a new level of presence and being and connection with love, which started to heal what was diseased. That presence allowed it to start to move and shift and change, which doesn't occur when I'm separate from it. And so I want to tell you another story about someone who had an actual mystical experience that is different than the one that we've been talking about a little bit, which is the one that's occurring inside of you all the time. If you just actually become very present, life is like a psychedelic experience. You don't need to take psychedelics if you're actually fully present. The world is incredibly magical. But before I do, I do want to mention one thing, which is that Amara and I are on this call together, doing this call together because we are having a retreat together. And it's in July. And I just want to mention it for a moment. It's July 7th through 14th, and it's on the island of Maui. And it's going to be at a very special place on the North Shore that is acres of lush tropical jungle where the mana, which is a Hawaiian word for spiritual power, is very great. The plants there are alive and they talk. And the aina, or the land there, has a vibration or a frequency that you can just feel walking around. And there's almost a 200-foot waterfall on the property, and a swimming pool, and hot tubs overlooking the ocean and a valley. And it's a sacred place in and of itself, very magical. And I think Amara has held retreats there before, and I've held retreats there before. And this retreat we're doing is going to be about entering into the mystical heart, entering into our heart, which is the place where the as above and the so below meet, the place where spirit and humanity meet, where heaven and earth meet. It is that awakened place where we both know that we are a human, and that when things happen in our lives that are painful, that they matter. If somebody hurts us, it matters. And we feel that, and we feel that pain, and we feel that sadness. That's our humanity. But that at the very same time, that temporary experience of pain, that's while we're here on this planet, is at the same moment, we are also spirit. We were not born, and we do not die. We are infinite. And what happens in this material reality doesn't matter at all. And those two realms are mutually exclusive, seemingly. How can something matter and not matter? How can it be infinite and finite? How can I be born and yet I'm not born? And yet the pinpoint place in the heart where those two meet is the place of true freedom, true peace, and awakening. And that's where we'll be navigating into on this retreat, and we'll be going to sacred sites where the mystical realms amplify our connection to our hearts and being in love and being in our fullness of who we are. And anything in the way of that getting healed, whether it's through cathartic release or through some mystical experience or through some kind of epiphany or aha that we have. But 90% of the people or more that go on these retreats have a life-changing experience where they literally describe that their life was different completely before versus after. Terminal disease, they come with it, they leave, it's gone. They've been single forever, they come back, they meet their soulmate. Anything and everything. So I just want to mention that for a minute and say that we're going to offer a special price on the retreat only for people on this call at the end of this call. And it's going to be very significant. So if you're interested, please hang on to the end of the call and we will do that. Now let me tell one quick story and I'll give it back to you, Amara. I want to talk about this lady that came and she had an open wound on her toe, right? So her toe had like the top of it was like ripped open and pussy and bloody. And she'd been to the doctors many times and it wouldn't heal. It wouldn't close. and they'd been there for 6 months. So on the retreat, one of the things that matters is our belief systems. You know, when we believe in the mystical realms, that opens the door to the possibility of them occurring. You know, I was walking through the forest once, and my friend said, look, the plants, they're waving at us. Look at the fairies, they're waving. And the leaves of the plants were kind of blowing in the wind. And I didn't quite believe it. So it wasn't real for me. But then later, after I'd had a lot of experiences, and I went back and I thought, well, why don't I just try that on? I don't know. How do I know what's real and not real? How does this little ego personality know the vastness of what's possible in the universe? Maybe I'll just set aside what I think might be true or not true and just experience what's possible. And I did that, and suddenly these plants started to talk to me, which I found interesting, but I still had some skepticism until one of them called me over to it and had me place my heart right on one of its leaves that was shaped like a heart. And I felt an electricity shoot through my body, and I was filled with white light. And I could feel the constriction that was in my heart that had held me from intimacy and vulnerability and deep connected love with others just start to melt out of my body. Mm. And I was different after that. And I believed in the power of plants and everything else having an aliveness and having an ability to interact with us. And whether it's actually true or not is completely irrelevant, because I believe it's true. It's true for me. So this lady I had told all these stories of this ascended master named Saint Germain, who visits people sometimes on my retreats, and he sometimes shows up in the form of a bee. So this lady's sitting by the stream with her toe, and a bee flies up and lands inside the wound on her toe and starts walking around inside the wound. Now, she's a little freaked out by this. You know, there's a bee walking around inside of her body, but she breathes really deeply and just stays present with it. And she asks, "Are you Saint Germain?" And the bee says, "Yes, I'm healing you." And so she just keeps breathing and breathing, and it's like tickling her with its legs and its little mandibles and things. And after about a minute or two of this, it flies off. And she's like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. I just had a healing from Saint Germain." And then her mind pops in. And it's like, or maybe I made all that up. You know, because it just sounded like a voice in my head that said it was Saint Germain. I don't know. And so she was a little bit questioning it. And then she just called out to the universe, you know, "Universe, please give me some kind of affirmation, some kind of confirmation that that was real so I can believe." And she walked back to meet the rest of the group. And one of the people that was in the group said, oh my God, I've been looking for you everywhere. I have this present that I've been meaning to give you. And guidance told me that now is the time to give it to you." And she's like, "Great." And this lady pulls out an 8.5 by 11 sketch of Saint Germain and hands it to her. And she's like, wow. But the real wow came the next day, because all of us had seen her toe, which hadn't healed in 6 months. And the next day when she woke up, her toe was completely healed. No sign of any injury whatsoever. These sites have the power for epiphanies, downloads, instant healings, mystical beings, true presence. One lady got woken up to true unconditional love inside of her in a way that she never, ever experienced before. And because of it, at 55 years old, with a history of failed relationships her entire life, 2 weeks after the retreat, she met what she now calls her soulmate, who she's marrying. They've been together for 8 years, but she's about to marry him. And 3 people on that retreat came with intention to find their true love, all of them in their 50s, all of them failed history their whole lives, all 3 within 1 month.
Wow. Wow. Cool.
Yeah, that's what I said. Wow. It was really extraordinary.
I admit that I have an affinity towards the mystical. I want to believe. So from a very, very early age, I'm just lapping it up. I mean, you know, just give me more of the mystery. So there's to some degree, I'm not as skeptical as some people might be. I long for the mystical, and therefore I welcome it when it happens. And yet there have been times this one time in particular where even though I was very open to, I thought I was very open to mystical events happening, but this particular event, I have to admit, it really completely blew me. I had no context for really understanding what had happened. We had been together with a small group of people for a number of days, about 5 days. And something gets really amplified when you bring your intention and you harness your energies together, and you're there for healing. And we were doing this all-night ceremony by a fire, and we were singing and really opening to spirit. And the whole focus of this particular retreat was about birthing the spirit child into reality. And so we had been doing this chanting together and this fire ceremony together. And we woke up in the morning. It was a beautiful experience, but I just went to sleep. We woke up in the morning, and this woman who she had gone into the retreat simply wanting to really let go of the chaos that was in her life. She wanted to, find a new job. She wanted to find a new relationship. Basically, she just wanted to start over and birth something new. And she wakes up in the morning and walks into the room, and she has right below her belly button, it was almost like burnt into her skin. It was a triangle pointing downward, which happens to be, we were in Australia, and it happens to be the Aboriginal symbol and also the Native American symbol. Going downward is the feminine symbol for life. And this was literally burned into her skin. And I thought that, if I just shut my eyes, that, it would disappear, or it would just kind of look like I don't know, maybe, your mind makes something. Maybe she rubbed herself really hard over and over all night, so she created this triangle on top of herself. And it lasted all day. The next day, I stayed in touch with her. It lasted for weeks. She was completely baffled, and yet, because it was a very, very benevolent thing that occurred to her, what it was like an arrow in her womb that gave her the permission. It was still her deciding. It wasn't this arrow on her skin. She went into her life. She changed her relationship. She changed career. She moved. She changed. She let go of everything that wasn't working, and had the ability and the strength and the hope to start over again in her life. And so sometimes the mystical things that happen are not just like poofs and scenarios in the sky that you can wonder about. They happen. Multiple people see them. Multiple people hear them, and there are visible and manifestations from the other realms that get transported into this realm. I have seen physical birth of substance things like arrows, things, coins that have been brought in from the dream realm into this physical existence. And so, I'm learning to, embrace these things and to recognize that there is mystery beyond what I know. What I can't control it. I can't say that I entirely understand it. I just know that when we co-create a really potent and a very powerful intention of death, change, transformation, abundance, birthing, renewal, for the deepest healing, what I have seen is that through nature and the co-creation of an intention of people together, the magical transformation that you can never predict can and indeed does happen.
Thank you for that, Amara. That was beautiful. And it had me want to share with you that, you know, a lot of my experiences have been in ordinary life, have been sitting in the parking lot of Walmart and, you know, sitting in my home or anywhere else. And yet the quickening of my ability to have those experiences has come from entering into ceremony and entering into these sacred sites, into vortexes. You know, in your story, Amar, you talked about this woman birthing something into the world. And, you know, on Maui, where our retreat is going to be, there is a birthing site that we often go to where the energy is concentrated, it's amplified, the energy of birthing. So in the mystical realm, which is the subtle energy of the land there, has a frequency. Just like I have a frequency that's different than Amara does. We're different. And so every piece of land is different. And that land has the personality or the energy of birthing. And if you step into that land like the ancient Hawaiians used to actually birth the next king, or when they really needed to create something, you know, if a tsunami came and wiped out their crops and they needed to birth new trees, you know, they would go to this site and meditate there, and then it would instantly occur, instant manifestation. And the death sites are similar. When there's something you need to release, egoic death at one level, or even the simple death of an idea or a belief or a way of being or the end of a relationship or a time in your life, like the snake shedding its skin, this site will amplify that process where you can release something in an instant. I've had a fear that haunted me my entire life, and I had used every psychological and metaphysical and spiritual technique that I could imagine hundreds of times to try to release this fear. And when I stepped into this death site, it emptied out of me in an instant, and it was gone forever. And there are healing sites for physical healing, emotional healing, spiritual healing. There's sexuality sites to heal our sexuality, our sexual shame and guilt and separation. And there are sites that connect us with our higher self. And on Maui, it's interesting that they have some pretty esoteric sites too. There's a site that's about teleportation. It's actually a school where the ancient Hawaiians used to go to, and it has different grades and levels where one would learn how to actually transport oneself to different places. Now, the beginning of that process is how to actually be fully where you are. How can you actually be fully in your body? That's the first step to learning how to actually leave. So someone asked a question. I just want to get to it before we get towards the end of the call, because they said, what is your secret for distinguishing communication from spirit or inner wisdom versus the egocentric mind? And it's an excellent question, and I teach an entire class about that, a whole workshop. And so I could talk for hours and hours on it, but I want to give you a really quick basic answer to that, which is that everything that's happening inside of you has a certain uniqueness. So if you were to go inside your mind and you were to study how you do the chatter in your mind that is meaningless thinking, and how the inner critic inside of you that criticizes you communicates with you, you would find that it's a very particular way, and that it's often the same way. So one day I was in Hawaii, and I wanted the answer to this question myself. I wanted to know, how does spirit communicate with me? And what I found since then is that there's a lot of ways. There's actually, all of us have about 8 different ways that spirit is speaking to us. But I wanted my primary, like, what's my real go-to? And so I went back and I studied a time when I knew I was guided, a time when I knew that my higher self had spoken to me. And it was an easy thing. I was in Arizona. I'm sure some of these people on the call live out there. And you know, at certain times of the year, it's sunny every day, blue skies, and it's not going to rain. And, you know, it was one of those days I lived there, and I was playing golf, and I was going to go play golf that day. and something had me grab an umbrella. And it made no sense, but I grabbed it. And it ended up pouring down rain on me that day. And so I knew that was not my logical mind. That was not my ego that had me grab that umbrella that day. That was something beyond the little me that's trapped in the logical, narrow world of 3D reality. And so I went back and I studied that time for how, and I teach people how to do this. I can't get into that right now, but how did I receive that communication? And I found that it's a very specific voice in my head. It's 4 inches behind my occiput ridge. It's at an angle, so it speaks upward like that. It's a male voice. It speaks softly, and it speaks slowly. And it has a particular tone and a particular pitch. And that voice is different than any other voice in my head. And so once I got to know that voice and I began to cultivate a relationship with it, then it was available to me anytime, anywhere, any place. I could check in with that voice, and it was the voice of God. It was the voice of guidance, and it was always right. Now, there are times when I'm blocked from actually hearing it, and I'll talk about that. I can't talk about that now, but another time. And just one more thing, I know Mara's got something to say, but that's just one of the ways. We also could be feeling things, and we could see things. And so I help people to actually go into their internal subtle body and find the own unique way that spirit is speaking to you, and get to know it so well that you'll know it the rest of your life. And when you spend a week on retreat, and the invitation is to be doing this in every moment all the time, and I teach an ancient technique to alter our perception of time so that the week we're together actually feels like a month. You've got a month to practice following this with not big consequences. You're not deciding whether to leave a partner or a job. You're deciding which fork to take in a trail. And then you're getting synchronistic responses from the universe as to whether you were actually correct. And you start to learn it, and you build a relationship with it. So that's the short answer. That was kind of long.
No, it was fantastic. I can't wait to go and do this and just immerse ourselves and being able to really listen and discern the nonsense voice and the higher voice. For me, just because really would like to leave you with something very short and very simple. For me, the ego voice is always very small, and it wants very, very small things. Will always be focused on some little small thing, even though it's trying to convince you that it's a very big thing. The voice of our higher selves, the voice of our dharma, the voice of our destiny, the voice of spirit is always great, is always much bigger. So it wants the big hunger, the big things, like where are we going in existence? What will this action, what will this do? And so will it lead me to greater connection and greater love? So our higher voice is always there for us to learn, to grow, to feel alive, and to feel connection. And the voice of the ego is always protecting us and keeping us small and keeping us focused on the little bitty things that don't matter. So the big voice is caught and found in the details that really matter. So I love this. You know, I everything you say is what magic is what I also practice, and what we shall do together is learning to immerse ourselves so that we can pay attention and begin to be able to discern what really matters. Who should we listen to? What part of ourselves, the little bitty part that is small, or the big part of ourselves that longs to grow, that longs to be close, that longs to be healthy, and that longs to have vitality and energy in our lives so that we can live with happiness. Very, very simple. The ego voice rarely makes us feel very happy.
Yeah, the voice of guidance is never saying anything critical or harsh to us or yelling at us.
Never.
And that's beautiful, Amara. And if you can imagine, you know, on the retreat that Amara and I will be doing together, we'll be actually leading the retreat from that place. We will rarely, if ever, have a plan. or have an agenda or know what we're going to do, because we're going to be tuned into who and what's present and what organically wants to unfold in the moment. And therefore, that creates the most possibility for the most synchronicity, the most mystery, the most healing, the most transformation, because we're more alive. We're not planned. We're not canned. And then we're going to invite every person on the retreat to be living from that space in every moment. So whether you even attend a teaching, whether you are at dinner, can you tune in at the deepest level and learn how your guidance communicates with you and learn to follow it in each moment. When we're out of the sacred site and you have an opportunity to explore that site individually on your own, what do? Do you go sit by this tree? Do you get in the stream? How do you know that? And we'll be giving teachings each day on how to deepen this and how to cultivate this and most empowering relationship you could ever have in your life, the relationship with spirit itself, which is actually you. It's just that we're mostly in the illusion of separation from spirit and what we truly are. And so I want to transition now just into telling you just a little bit about our retreat, the discount that we're going to offer, and what the next steps might be if you have any level of interest whatsoever. Because we have an hour here right now to try to convey a few things to you about the mystical realms. But we haven't really talked about the retreat, what occurs on our retreat, what's going to happen, what's possible. And so we want to let you know, and we want to encourage you to text us. And we'll give you our numbers in a moment. And you can text either one of us. You can text us with a question. You can text us with a request for more information. You can text us because you want to get to know me better, or you want to get to know Amara better. We're happy to do that. We're happy to share more about anything we talked about tonight. And we're also happy to sit with you if you feel guided to come on the retreat, or you want to come on retreat, but are not sure if it's possible. Maybe there's a financial block. Maybe there's a block to and other practical considerations, such as whether you can get off work or care for your children or whatever it is. If we create the power of two together, and we bring our presence and we bring our love and we bring our connection to whatever that obstacle is, it's very likely going to shift and move. And we can also help you find, if you're just curious, if you're guided, like, is this the truth for me to attend? We can hold space for that too. So we're available for any and all of that. This is going to be a life-changing experience. I can tell you, I'd say pretty much everybody, there's surely an exception here or there, that's come on a retreat with me has left with a connection with their inner guidance that has changed their life forever and stayed with them to some degree forever, some more than others. And 8, 9 out of 10 people, like I said, have a miracle. They have something that they never realized was possible, that shifts and change. Whatever intention they bring, whether it's material or spiritual, it happens. It usually happens quickly. And then the island of Maui, as the teacher that you're really coming to be with, will actually begin to catalyze what you're really there for, to really wake you up to another level of reality, another level of your authenticity, of who you really are, and being in your heart, and really loving yourself deeply and completely. Because if you ask any psychologist or spiritual teacher, do you think that the secret would be for me to just love myself? They're all going to say yes. But very few could actually teach you how to unconditionally love yourself. And that is one thing that I can guarantee you. You're going to learn how to unconditionally love the parts of you that you have distanced yourself from, divided yourself from, and been separate from. And that both brings peace and healing.
Oh, and I would like to close this very beautiful talk, really enjoying. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on board. And I suspect that Magic and I are having a pretty good time here. We're going to continue these kinds of conversations because we're just getting started. As we promised, I want to mention this very special offer only for people on this call to, as Magic said, text us within the next 48 hours. The cost of the retreat is $4,650. If you contact us and let us know that you would like to be there. Within 48 hours, we are going to offer a $1,200 discount. So the retreat, a 7-day retreat, in all-inclusive retreat on Maui, is $3,400. And I'm also told, if there's any other little reservations about Hawaii at this time, that the flights are very, very low right now, because a lot of people have the misconception that travel is restricted on Hawaii, and on Maui is a completely different island. I have friends that are in the area where the volcano is. It is quite far away. The rest of Hawaii is sending. We are all sending our blessings to those people in harm's way near the volcano. And I want you to know that, that's just Pele, and that is what's happening. And Hawaii and Maui is, welcoming us at the retreat center at Haleakua. And so we would love, love, love for you to join us. And
Amara, before you go on, can I make another quick note about the volcano?
Yeah.
Hawaii's volcanoes are called shield volcanoes. So they're very different than, say, Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens, when it blew, it exploded, a gaseous explosion that projectile launched boulders, hundreds of miles. Hawaiian volcanoes don't do that. They are very localized. The Big Island is far away from Maui, and the volcano has been erupting on the Big Island for 30 consecutive years. This is nothing new. The only thing that is new right now is that there is a neighborhood that is being harmed, which our heart goes out to those people that are in that neighborhood. But it is nothing more than some fissures opening in an area that already had volcanic activity. I saw the lava flowing 18 months ago when I was on Maui.
Yeah, I was just there.
Islands. Yeah, and so this is no threat to what's happening on Maui, but it does, because the perception in the world is that Hawaii is just one place and there's a volcano and it's dangerous. The flights are actually quite cheap right now.
Yeah, so it could be an opportunity. And we want to thank you, and we will see you in the mystical realms.
I'm wondering if everybody can see our beautiful and lovely friend Joella has posted our phone numbers, our cell phone numbers, in the there we go. The screen has changed, so now you're seeing that, and you can see both of our websites there as well. If you want to find out a little more, there are on my website, maybe on Amara's too, but definitely on my website, in the tab at the top, there's something that says testimonials. You can see other people. On our last call I had some people on the call who had been on retreats, and they were like, I want to share about my testimonials. Oh my God, it's so amazing. It changes your life. So if you want to see some of that, and it's not just rah, 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 there's people that are crying because of the changes that they've experienced. And there's people sharing all kinds of experiences of all kinds of ages and all kinds of races. And so you can watch some of that. And there's a video on the Hawaii page that talks about what goes on the retreat, and it's from the perspective of participants sharing about it. And so there's some info there where you can see more. And if you don't know Amara and you want to find out more about Amara, she's got info about who she is on her website. And I've got on my website, if you click under About Us and then Who is Magic, there's a video from other people's perspectives sharing about me, and you can learn more about us. What we really want you to do is we'd like to hear from you. Send us a text so we can just say hi and maybe answer something for you or share something.
Yeah,
I'm just going to thank them, and then you can take over, Amara, and finish it up. Okay. But I just want to thank you for being on the call. I really appreciate everybody being here and your presence. I could feel your presence. I could feel your attentiveness, and I really appreciate it, and I'm loving each and every one of you, and hope that our paths will cross again. Thank you so much.
No, beautiful, Magic. That was fantastic. And I have some very dear friends that can see your little boxes and your some of your pictures and some of your names. Thank you so much. It's really nice to see you. This has been really fun. And I see lots of new names. So I look forward to perhaps meeting you someday. Really, thank you so much for coming. Hope to meet you soon and see you in the mystical realms.
Thank you.